There's still time to flip this switch no matter how old you are right now. Freedom doesn't have an expiration date, and age is not a valid excuse to keep living scared of the next bill. Most people spend a lifetime running, working, burning out, and still hit 60, 65 years old terrified of the payment due next month. The promise was simple. Study, get a good job, work hard, and one day you'll finally rest in peace. But real life turned out very different. A lot of people retire exhausted, dependent, with no savings, no emotional control, and that bitter feeling that they gave everything and still didn't build the wealth they expected. It's tough to admit, but the game was designed to create disciplined people who serve the system, not people who actually conquer freedom. Almost no one was taught about entrepreneurship, investing, self-confidence, and how to use a job as a tool instead of a lifelong cage. Instead, they sold a dream of security that in practice looks a lot more like a trap. Decades of work and routine in exchange for an income that can't even keep up with the cost of living. Behind many smiles at 60th birthday parties, there's a quiet thought. This is not the life I imagined for myself. The good news is it's still possible to turn this around, no matter how old you are. What separates people who end life counting coins from those who build real freedom is exactly what almost nobody explains. Daily discipline, emotional control, better financial decisions, small entrepreneurial moves, and a new way of seeing work, money, and time. When you start to understand these laws and actually apply them, you stop walking in the dark and begin to see a real path of transformation, where the reward is not just surviving until 65, but creating a life with much more dignity, choice, and peace of mind. A lot of people confuse routine with freedom, as if clocking in for 40 years straight were some kind of shortcut to financial peace at 65. They enter the job market young, believe that hard work alone solves everything, keep obeying rules, swallowing frustration and repeating that one day I'll rest. In real life, the routine eats their dreams alive. Emotional control is tested every single day, and discipline becomes just an obligation, not a conscious choice. In that scenario, entrepreneurship doesn't even show up as a real option, and motivational quotes end up as screenshots in the phone instead of consistent action. That's how so many people find out too late that the promised retirement freedom is actually just the same economic dependence, only now with less energy to change. The problem is not working hard. The problem is believing that by itself guarantees lasting results. If you never learn to think strategically, to build self-confidence and create new income streams, you get stuck on a single road, just hoping nothing goes wrong along the way. A lot of people hear about emotional control, discipline, consistency, and entrepreneurship, but translate all that into just hold on to the job, not into planning real freedom. They keep going with the flow, ignoring that the world changes, costs go up, and depending on a single paycheck is like building a house on rented land. Deep down, they feel they deserve more, but routine pulls them back like an invisible rubber band every time the idea of trying something different shows up. If we add a bit of humor, it's almost like most people live in lifelong automatic mode, paying bills today and betting everything on a retirement that may never look like they imagined. True freedom doesn't come from years of service. It comes from designing systems, using entrepreneurship intelligently and making money work for you instead of against you. That's where daily decisions come in. Building discipline, practicing emotional control, feeding self-confidence, and applying in real life everything that should have left the motivational quote phase. Every choice you make today is drawing your results for the next 10, 20, 30 years, even if that doesn't feel obvious yet. And when that realization finally hits, your mind opens up to a new level. Hard work stops being a prison and starts becoming a tool to build something bigger. Almost everyone was taught to believe that the more you work, the richer you'll be, as if overtime hours automatically meant freedom. In real life, those who only sell time eventually discover that tiredness does not translate into results, much less into long-term wealth. Real wealth starts when you learn to think in terms of entrepreneurship, systems, and ownership, not just a paycheck at the end of the month. That's the difference between being the gear that keeps someone else's machine running, or being the one who calmly builds their own machine, with emotional control and discipline. This turning point happens the moment your mind shifts from work more to think smarter, without dropping effort, just directing it with much more intelligence. When you start seeing your job as a stepping stone, not the final destination, you begin to ask questions that change everything. How can I turn what I know into something that's mine? How can I use my current job to fund a bigger project? How can I create something that keeps generating results, even when I'm not there 24/7? These questions open room for entrepreneurship, asset building, self-confidence, and full ownership of your path. Whoever thinks this way realizes that knowledge applied consistently is worth more than any extra hour slapped on the time card. Little by little, you stop seeing yourself as just an employee and start seeing yourself as someone who builds, decides, and leads their own financial future. In this process, motivational quotes stop being cute little texts and become daily reminders that wealth is a mental game before it ever becomes a numbers game. You'll need discipline to study, to test things, to fail small, adjust the route, and keep going even when no one around you understands this new mindset. Emotional control steps in to hold your anxiety, your comparisons, and your fear of stepping off the traditional track. Bit by bit, you start testing new income sources, organizing your money, creating small systems, and spotting opportunities where you once saw only routine. When that inner construction starts to take shape, it gets much easier to see that the obedient person's reward is not the only path, and that there is a very different way of seeing both retirement and freedom. Many people spend life believing that traditional retirement is the big prize after decades of effort, almost like a trophy for good behavior. They work for years following rules, taking orders, stuffing their emotions down, all under the promise that they'll finally rest when they hit that magic age. But when that day arrives, a lot of them discover their income is limited, their dreams were left behind, and the feeling of freedom shows up mixed with fresh worries. Instead of independence, what appears is the fear of running out of money, the worry about needing to depend on family, and the frustration of realizing that entrepreneurship and self-confidence could have been developed way earlier. That's the so-called reward of the obedient. Free time with very little room to choose how to actually live that time. Meanwhile, those who start early, building assets, systems, and income streams that work even without constant presence, are playing a different game. These are people who use discipline and emotional control to turn today's work into leverage for future results, not just month-to-month survival. Instead of depending solely on a fixed benefit, they build structures that keep producing, mixing entrepreneurship with smart planning. It's not about winning the lottery, it's about stacking bricks one on top of the other to create a reality where money works with you, not against you. Later on, retirement stops being the final chapter and becomes just another season of life, with much more real freedom of choice. In this context, motivational phrases are not some dreamy lie. They're fuel to keep your long-term vision alive when the present feels heavy. The person who cultivates self-confidence, consistency, and discipline day after day does not wait for the government, a company, or luck to decide what their old age will look like. They quietly step into the driver's seat, make adjustments, cut excess, learn to invest, test entrepreneurial ideas, and celebrate each small win as proof that they're stepping out of the obedient, waiting for a reward line. Over time, it becomes clear that freedom is not a stamp on a pay stub, but an internal and external construction made of brave choices. And once that understanding clicks, it becomes impossible not to question the system that trains minds to serve instead of to command their own destiny. From an early age, most people are trained to memorize content, follow rules, and chase good grades, not to question, create, or build their own path. School teaches you to arrive on time, ask permission for everything, and fear making mistakes, as if failure were a sign of defeat instead of a natural part of learning. That's how emotional control is molded to please and conform, instead of building self-confidence to decide and take calculated risks. There's almost no talk about entrepreneurship, creating solutions, or using motivational phrases as tools to strengthen your mind instead of just memorizing formulas. The result is a crowd prepared to look for a job, not to create their own opportunities and results. This kind of training shapes adults who know how to follow orders, but freeze when it's time to make their own decisions. Many even feel guilty just for thinking about leaving the traditional script, because they were conditioned to believe that stability comes from obedience, not from building. Nobody taught them about money, investing, business, emotional control, practical discipline, and habits that lead to real results outside a traditional employment contract. They never learned how to use mistakes as a teacher, or how to see entrepreneurship as a real path to a life with more freedom. Deep down, a weird sensation remains. Years of study and yet no real tools to lead their own financial destiny. When someone finally starts to see how that whole structure works, it's normal to feel a mix of anger and relief. Anger for realizing they could have learned about self-confidence, consistency, and wealth building much earlier, and relief for finally seeing that there's still time to relearn all this in practice. At that stage, motivational phrases stop sounding cliché and start acting like triggers that shift habits, widen perspective, and push you to seek the knowledge school never delivered. Discipline becomes a conscious choice, not punishment, and emotional control becomes a growth tool instead of repression. From that point on, it becomes almost impossible to see a job as the final stop without also seeing it as a temporary tool for something much bigger. A job is not the villain, it's a starting point. It helps you pay the bills, gain experience, test emotional control, and build discipline. But it doesn't have to be the last chapter of your story. When you start seeing your job as a tool, you naturally ask, how can I use this paycheck to invest in knowledge, build an emergency fund, or finance my own project? That shift changes everything, because it takes away the pressure that formal work must alone guarantee freedom. Entrepreneurship then walks onto the stage as a real possibility, not as some fairy tale only for special people. Slowly, your mind begins to connect your current job with future results, rather than using it only to survive from month to month. The difference lies in the intention behind each working day. Some people are just waiting for payday. Others see every month as a chance to move 1 inch closer to their own freedom. That second group relies on consistency, discipline, and at least a basic plan, cutting excess, organizing finances, and creating space to invest in themselves. In that context, motivational phrases work like practical reminders. Don't work only for today, work for your future self too. Once you start thinking like that, your job stops feeling like a prison and starts acting like a springboard. Of course, that doesn't mean quitting everything overnight or acting on impulse. It means using your job as a lab, observing problems, understanding people, training emotional control, practicing quiet leadership, and learning what you can later apply to your own business or side income. Every skill you build there can turn into an asset, as long as you have enough self-confidence to see the value in what you're learning. It's a mid to long-term game where today's discipline prepares tomorrow's results, even if nobody is clapping for you yet. And in that quiet process, it gets clearer and clearer that the laws that govern wealth go far beyond a payslip. They touch something deeper tied to thought, faith, action, and repetition. There's a huge difference between wanting money and truly aligning yourself with the laws that govern wealth. This is not empty mysticism. It's understanding that thoughts, beliefs, actions, and repetition create an inner pattern that either attracts or repels opportunities. When someone keeps repeating, I can't, I don't deserve it, it's not for me, the brain obeys, and behavior follows. On the other hand, those who choose to feed self-confidence, the right motivational phrases, and a daily focus on results start seeing doors where they once saw only walls. It's like changing the lens you use to see the world before trying to change your bank balance. These spiritual laws of wealth ask for something simple and challenging at the same time: coherence. Thinking about prosperity but always acting out of fear is like trying to drive with the parking brake on. The person who wants to become an entrepreneur but feeds failure thoughts every day is sabotaging their own discipline before they even get started. On the flip side, those who commit to aligning thought, emotion, and action, even in small steps, start building a powerful inner consistency. Over time, that consistency becomes the foundation for bolder decisions, stronger emotional control, and more solid results. None of this works without repetition. A single prayer, one random motivational quote, or one perfect day of discipline doesn't build wealth, just like one workout doesn't transform your body. The difference appears when you decide, day after day, to train your mind, watch what you think and say, choose better company, and use your time wisely. This ongoing alignment between faith, vision, action, and adjustment creates a kind of inner entrepreneurship that comes before any formal business. When that invisible foundation gets stronger, your daily habits start to carry a completely different weight in the construction of real freedom. The habits you repeat on autopilot matter more than the dreams you only keep in your head. The way you wake up, what you do in your first hours, how you react to problems, how you handle your money, all of that is quietly sketching your future. Without noticing, many people build a personal prison made of procrastination, excuses, lack of discipline, and zero planning. Then they call it bad luck when the results don't show up, even though there was no consistent action. The good news is, the same energy used to maintain bad habits can be redirected to build habits that actually set you free. Once you start organizing your day with intention, everything begins to feel different. A simple commitment to study entrepreneurship for just 30 minutes a day can create a massive shift over a few months. Writing down your expenses, making a basic plan, setting weekly goals and reviewing what worked and what didn't gives you clarity, self-confidence, and emotional control. Small rituals, like reading motivational phrases that reinforce focus and action, help your mind remember every day the direction you chose. From the outside, it may look small, but inside, it moves you from survival mode to construction mode. Pace is everything in this game. There's no point in exploding with motivation for 1 week and then doing nothing the rest of the month. Wealth and freedom are built on consistency, not on random bursts. It's discipline in doing the basics well over and over that allows you to make bigger decisions with more confidence down the road. Little by little, that person who felt trapped by routine realizes it wasn't the work itself that kept them chained. It was their habits. And when that realization lands, it becomes much easier to see how each day can pull you closer to opportunity, instead of leaving you permanently chasing those who already chose to act. Every time someone says, "I'll deal with that later," about something important, they're quietly handing over space, opportunities, and results to people who decide faster. Delaying decisions is, in practice, a decision to stay still while others move, using entrepreneurship, discipline, and emotional control to build exactly what they want. Procrastination feels comfortable, but the interest rate is brutal. Wasted time, closed doors, and that bitter thought of "I could have started back then." Meanwhile, those who act, even scared, learn, adjust, and stack small results that compound over time. That's how the invisible line forms, the one where a few decide and many just watch. Making decisions quickly is not the same as being reckless. It's about clarity on what you want and courage to take the next step, even a tiny one. The person who builds self-confidence, uses motivational phrases as inner commands, and leans on consistent daily action has a huge edge in any scenario. They understand that discipline is not punishment. It's a shortcut to results the indecisive will never see. Emotional control steps in to tame fear, anxiety, and other people's opinions so they don't freeze you in place. Over time, every "I'll do it today" becomes a new step up, while every "one day I'll do it" digs a deeper hole that's harder to climb out of. Those who choose to act start seeing opportunities where most people just see risk or extra work. Instead of only dreaming about financial freedom, they use what they already have: time, skills, a job, contacts, as strategic tools. Even when they make mistakes, they learn more than those who spend years planning without execution, because results only show up for those who are actually in the game. That's the person who starts to combine entrepreneurship, discipline, and consistency in a practical way, not just in theory. And once this new rhythm sets in, it becomes natural to go beyond simple action and enter the territory of true leadership and freedom, where you stop serving routines and fears as if they were the bosses of your life. True freedom starts the moment you decide you're done living according to routine, fear, and other people's opinions. You might stay in the same job, the same house, the same city, but something shifts inside. You drop the supporting role and step into the author role of your life. That move demands self-confidence, emotional control, and a solid dose of discipline to say no to what keeps you stuck and yes to what actually builds. It's when you stop accepting everything on autopilot and start asking, does this bring me closer to or further from the life I want? From those honest answers, your choices naturally rise to a different level. Leading your own life doesn't mean becoming some superhero. It means taking responsibility even for the smallest daily decisions. Whoever steps into that place understands that entrepreneurship isn't just opening a company. It's the attitude of creating paths instead of waiting for instructions. Every study session, every new habit, every boundary set to protect your focus is an act of personal leadership. In this context, motivational phrases become identity reminders. I'm not here just to survive, I'm here to build results. Over time, this new posture even starts to reshape how you show up with your family, co-workers, and work environment. It's interesting to notice how, once someone truly takes command of their life, their fears move to a different place. They still exist, but they stop driving the car and become simple indicators that something new is being built. Discipline helps sustain this new identity on the days when motivation disappears, and consistency turns isolated choices into a lifestyle. Little by little, you realize you're no longer serving routines blindly. You're using those routines in service of your goals. At that stage, daily affirmations and concrete habits gain even more power because they start turning thoughts into visible financial results, setting the stage for a freedom far more real than the one promised by traditional retirement. Daily affirmations aren't magic. They're mental training. When you wake up and instead of saying, "My life never works out," you start declaring with conviction that you're building discipline, self-confidence, and real results. Something inside you shifts. These motivational phrases, spoken with intention, help your brain focus on what you want to create, not just what you're trying to avoid. Over time, your inner dialogue stops being your enemy and becomes your ally, pushing you toward action instead of dragging you into paralysis. And that makes all the difference on the days when the urge to quit screams the loudest. But it's not enough to talk a good game and live the same way. Real affirmation comes with real habit. If you say you have emotional control, you need to practice it in arguments, in tight financial moments, in stressful situations. If you declare you're developing entrepreneurship, you need to carve out time to study, plan, test ideas, and adjust your course. Every small action confirms what your mouth declared, building a powerful cycle of coherence between what you think, what you say, and what you do. That's where consistency becomes the bridge between your inner world and your outer results. With time, these daily practices start to show up in your bank account and in your lifestyle. You begin making smarter financial decisions, saying no to expenses that pull you away from freedom, and yes to opportunities that demand courage, but bring growth. The affirmations stop being just words and turn into identity. I'm disciplined. I'm capable of learning. I'm a builder of results. I'm responsible for my story. As that identity takes root, the old image of someone working until 65 to end up with almost nothing starts to fade, replaced by a new vision of old age, active, conscious, and far more free than what most people were taught to accept. Now that all of this is wide open in front of you, the real question isn't, does this work? But what are you going to do with this? Are you going to keep living on autopilot like so many people who work until 65 and end up with almost nothing? Or are you going to use entrepreneurship, discipline, and emotional control to write a different story? It's not about perfection. It's about decision. Which habit can you change today? Which financial choice can you tweak? Which small action can you take to kick off a new cycle of results in your life? Take a brutally honest look at your routine. Is it taking you toward freedom or pushing you into the same old line as everyone else? How long will you be okay having self-confidence only in theory and leaving real action for later? If nothing changes, nothing changes. But if you start, even small, applying these principles of consistency, the right motivational phrases, planning and action, that life that feels so far away starts moving a few steps closer. And like it or not, time is going to pass anyway. The only difference is whether it finds you complaining or harvesting what you decided to plant. If this content hit a nerve, don't just shelve this desire to change. Turn it into action. Pick one point to apply today, not tomorrow, and take advantage of this new phase right now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can keep learning about money, freedom, discipline, emotional control, entrepreneurship, and building real results. The idea here is simple. Every video pushes you a little further away from average, and a lot closer to the life you truly deserve to live.